All right, everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to go over the lesson on compound conditionals. And, I'm still getting used to this new format too. One of the things we've done this semester is obviously we put a lot more content in front of you in the form of these interactive lessons. In the past, the material that you're seeing would be essentially presented in class. And I don't really feel like I have to do that anymore, which is great. And I think that, people are in the process of kind of figuring out how this is going to work. And, I'm fairly happy with the data that we're starting to see on people completing the homework and stuff like that. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. But anyway, all to say that this hour, 50 minutes, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, that we spend together doesn't really have to feel like a lecture. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't feel like a lecture. It's felt a little like a lecture for the past couple of weeks. So maybe next week we'll move this to Zoom, and maybe that'll be more fun, a little bit more interactive, and we can sort of dive into some different types of topics, and I can take more questions or whatever. But I am, really, excited and interested in taking questions from people that are. Did people get extra credit for playing with my dog? No, that's not true. He would like that. He would like that a lot. He would be like, sweet. No one has ever received extra credit in this class for playing with my dog. But yeah, I don't know. Like the dog would appreciate that, particularly if it involves food. So let's see. I feel hurt that there have been extra credit opportunities in the form that I didn't see. Oh, I don't know. I don't feel like none of the extra credit opportunities have closed down yet. So you still have a chance to pick up on those. There are. I'm encouraging. We need to find a way to encourage people to keep up with what's going on in the class. I don't like to send a lot of mass email. The forum posts are actually way nicer than email for me because I can make changes later. We can talk about it in the chat. Particularly being able to edit things is awesome because I make mistakes, and so I post stuff and then make little tweaks as people start to look at it, and obviously we can clarify things as there's questions. So I like to try to transition the course away from using email almost entirely. That includes getting in touch with me, but that also includes us getting in touch with you. So the extra credit for reading the forum announcements is really just a way that we kind of try to encourage people to pay attention to what's going on the forum. Style rules, yeah. So let's, we can. Well, let me, so I'll sort of ask people what you guys would like to do today. I'm happy to do kind of a quick walkthrough of what's on today's lesson. Although I think the lesson is pretty self-contained. I shouldn't say self-explanatory, but it does speak for itself. This is a little bit of a. Last couple days have been a little heavier in terms of needing to go slowly through some new syntax for people, particularly people that are. Haven't programmed before and stuff like that. So, and this is the point where we start to see these smaller building blocks starting to be chained together into these bigger chunks of code that can be intimidating when you've never done this before. But if you break it down piece by piece, turn out to be, fairly, again, they can get a little complicated, but they're built of these smaller parts. And so that's one thing I would encourage everybody in this class, whether you programmed before or you haven't. Take this opportunity to really zero in on bits and pieces of each program and make sure that you really understand what the code is doing on every single line, every single statement. When you read larger pieces of code, you don't always have to do that. Sometimes they're going to try to just zoom around, figure out exactly what it is you need to fix or to modify and ignore a lot of what else is going on. But when we start out with these small examples, we really kind of do want to do almost like a close reading. I think some of this almost is like reading poetry, right? I mean, you go like word by word through this, really, thinking about what's happening, making sure that every single character, every single clause, every single sentence or paragraph of the code really makes sense, right? And that's kind of our approach going forward. Let's see here. What is a check style error? Check the forum. I can come back to that. Let's see here. Well, so if we do things on Zoom, we'll post them on YouTube. There is a little bit of an issue doing that. So we'll keep talking about this. Maybe I'll put up a poll over the weekend and see what people are happier with. Let's talk check style, since there was a question on check style. So let me get out the lessons. I'm just gonna grab. We're gonna post. I'm gonna put a playground up on the forum. On the website. That'll just be like a single page playground that you guys can mess around with. I'll probably get to that over the weekend. But for now, if you need to play, you can grab any one of these and just mess around a little bit. So let's talk about so check style. There is a list of rules for check style that I could send you, but it's very long and very comprehensive and covers a lot of things that you don't need to know about yet. So what I would really encourage you to do, and actually, why don't I do this? I'll just start with the example. We'll run this code and we'll see that it works and there's no check style errors. And then I'll introduce some errors that cause check style problems, and we'll talk about what they are, right? So for example, here's one. So check style requires that around operators, whether they're mathematical operators, conditional operators like this one, you put some spaces. And actually you need a certain amount of space, right? Actually, this I guess is okay. Check style doesn't mind as long as there's some space. Let's try this. Let's try putting a lot of space. That's okay. This starts to become a little silly. I wouldn't do this, but you're not going to get points off for it from check style. And the reason for this is, when you start to remove space, right, which you could do, like, I think this is probably valid Java. This becomes like, imagine looking at this and trying to figure out what's going on. This is actually quite hard to read. So check style, the rules that we expect you to follow are really focused on consistency and readability. So by spacing this out, it's a lot easier on the eyes. The white space gives you hints about where different parts of this expression start and end. And so that's the reason behind this, right? So check style is going to enforce some white space requirements. Now, keep in mind, you should really never lose points for check style. The reason is that we always give you unlimited attempts on the homework problems within the deadlines, right? And on the quizzes. And so if you make a mistake, fix it. And check style errors are very good at explaining to you what the problem is, right? So if I do this, you'll see that it tells me the line number where the problem is, which is line 2, and then it tells me what the problem is. Okay, it says, and it tells me the exact symbol that's not followed by white space. And so these are very, very easy problems to fix. Once you get used to this, you'll just start writing code that meets the check style requirements without any problems. But sometimes even I make mistakes, and then, you'll see on some of the walkthroughs there is a barrage of check style errors produced because I forgot to do something or whatever. And you just look at the messages and you go back and you fix the errors. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. We'll probably have a few parts of next week's lesson that'll focus on debugging, fixing problems, understanding how to deal with various types of error messages, because that's really important when you're getting started programming. We all make mistakes. Like, I still make tons of mistakes every day when I'm programming and building things for the class. What I've gotten better at over the years is fixing them quickly. So it's just not a big deal. It's like oh, okay, oh yeah, I goofed up again. I made that mistake. I'm gonna just go ahead and fix it. And what you get good at is kind of seeing the error message, seeing the code, and be like, oh right, and that starts to become second nature. It takes practice, which you'll get. So let's look at some other type of check style errors. So for example, stuff like this can produce a barrage of check style errors. And the reason is that check style requires that we kind of link our else ifs together in this particular way. So if I have an else if statement, I want the if on the same line as the else. Again, this is a readability issue. So if I look at this chunk of code, it's easy to think that this if statement is actually an independent if statement that it's not linked to this one, right? So when I link two if statements together using else, the conditions are evaluated from top to bottom, and Java will only execute one of the branches. If I start a new if statement, right? So if I did this is, you'll see now that there are two parts of this code that are executed, right? So I'm actually executing both this branch because this is its own if statement. These two if statements are now independent. And so that's the reason for check style not allowing you to do something like this, is because, again, it's very confusing, right? These are all requirements that are built around readability. Okay, so probably, and I'm just going to do this one. Yeah, so grammar rules. So these aren't rules. They're actually not enforced by Java. What this conventions that we have adopted to improve readability. So when you're working with code, it's really helpful if code has a specific set of formats so that you can see what's going on. Let's see here. It looks like it thinks that I'm offline. I don't know if my internet went down. Okay, so it's back. Sorry. It looks like I'm having some internet connectivity issues here, but I think we're back. Oh, things are drifting around. What is going on? All right, so it looks like we're back online now. Sorry about this. I'll keep an eye on the situation. I don't know what's going on. I saw the Xfinity truck down the street today, so that's never a good sign. They're out working in my neighborhood all the time, and every time they're doing something, I hope maybe they're fixing things and things are going to get better, and it never really seems to work out that way. So, let's go back to check style. So this is the one that tends to bother people the most, particularly people that have programmed before. Is that check style, we've configured it so it does not allow you to do this. By the way, the conventions that we're using for check style, so check style is a tool that can enforce a lot of different rules. The set of rules that we've picked are based on what's called the Sun Java coding conventions. That's S-U-N. Sun was the company that created programming language. So these are the formatting rules created by the creators of Java. So I think that's a pretty reasonable set of guidelines. There are other sets of rules. So for example, Google has a set of rules that they use for their Java code that are a little different than the Sun rules, but we use the Sun rules. So for example, brace placement is something that tends to be, if you're coming from, if you programmed in high school or something, you might have been taught to place your braces like this, for example. I guess that's the other way of doing it. So people learn to do stuff like this, right. So here's a piece of code that somebody might write if they were taught by a certain type of person in high school. And is one right and the other wrong? No, that's a valid way to write code, and some people prefer that way. For CS 125, this is what we've decided to do, and we feel pretty good about it. Partly because when all of you follow the same coding conventions, it makes things much, much easier for our core staff. So, over the coming weeks and months, the core staff in this class are going to spend a lot of time. We're going to have our CS 125 help site up soon that allows you to share your screen and get help from the core staff. When you do that, they spend a lot of time over the semester reading your code. So you're going to need help with the homework problems, and you're going to go on the help site and you're going to share your screen, and they're going to see what you're doing on the homework problem or on the machine project once we release that. And so having you all write code that shares at least the same stylistic conventions makes things a lot easier on the staff, because they're looking at code that at least has certain common features. Now, one of the things I'll also say in our defense is that if you look at more modern programming languages, like Go, for example, is, and I think Rust does this as well, they actually have a format, the rules that are part of the language. So when you write Go code, there's only one right way to place a brace in the Go programming language. And again, I think Rust has the same thing, and I think some other languages that have this as well. And the reason for this is that it's really not useful to fight about this stuff. It's sort of dumb, right? It's just like, let's just make all the code look the same so that we don't have one group of people that is putting their braces down here and one group of people that's putting them on the same line. It's just silly, right? Like, why don't we just have a rule about this, an actual rule from the official? So again, what we're enforcing is a convention. In other languages, this is actually part of the rules that govern the language, just like the syntax of the language. And the reason for that is again, people learned over years and years that this is a really dumb thing to fight about, right? Like it's not worth it, right? You'll also find, and we don't provide you with this, and I think it's good to get in the habit of being able to write code that's formatted properly, but for a lot of languages, and Java is one of them, there are tools that will automatically reformat your code for you. And that's pretty nice, right? So they'll just if you write something like this, they'll just automatically go through and fix it for you and put the brace in the right place. So again, we don't provide those for you in this playground environment, and that's intentional because we want you to learn how to write the code formatted properly. So again, other little places where you might get into problems, putting extra white space. I don't know what they're teaching in high school these days. Maybe they taught you to do that. You could do this inside, here, same thing. You're going to get check style errors. Placing two, so in Java, technically, I can do this. This is actually valid Java code. And it looks like check style also allows you to do that. I don't know why. I'm gonna go find that and turn that off because that shouldn't be that shouldn't be okay, right? Because this is again very, very difficult to read because now I have two statements on the same line. So clearly there's some check style rule that I'll go figure out how to turn on later, but this is not something that we want to enable, but it looks like it's on by accident. So I'll go fix that. Let's see here. So going back. Yes, correct. So yeah, so this isn't required. This is the check style rules are there. They're a convention, and they're there to help you write code that looks that's easier for us to understand and parse, and help you with. Let's see here. There are, so Prashant makes a good point. There are languages where white space is important. So Python is a language, for example, where white space matters, right? And in Java is not a language where white space matters. I wish I had a way to actually turn off the check style temporarily. And you'd be able to see that basically like in Java, I could write code that looks like this is valid Java code. Because Java doesn't care about white space. It's actually able to parse this code just fine. It looks here, it sees a semicolon, and then it sees an if statement. Here's the conditional expression. Here's the block of code. The white space that we use, particularly new lines and the indentation, is entirely for the purpose of readability. It just is because this piece of code is way easier to understand than if this were all on one line, right? But Java allows you to do that. Python, other programming languages now make white space important. So if you've written some Python code, and I don't have a Python playground, well, I can find one. We did this the other day. So, again, and this course is not in Python. You don't, it's not a course in Python, but in Python, my if statements are how Python identifies the block of code is through indentation. So now you'll see I'm inside a block of code, and I'm going to print hello, and then I would put my else statement down here, and I can, how do I run this again? I'll put this. So this prints hello. If I make I -1, then it's going to print small. So here in Python, the blocks of code. So in Java, we talked last time about how do you create a block. So when I have an if statement, I'm telling Java that I want to execute a particular chunk of code only if a particular condition is true. And so I need to be able to, both identify the condition, which is what goes inside these parentheses. This is my conditional expression. It's the part of the code that determines whether or not the block will be executed. But I also need to identify the block. In Java, the way I identify a block is through these curly braces. So a block of code in Java starts with a curly brace and ends with a curly brace. In Python, the block of code is indicated. So you'll see here, there's no braces in Python. Right? I have something that looks very similar, but my block of code is actually the part that's indented. So if I do this, then I think what's going to happen, so it's going to complain because I had an if statement and there was no indented block. So it expects me to put this over here to the right. So that's how I identify a block. And just like Java, I can have multiple indented blocks within the same program, and this will work just fine. Oh, it doesn't like this. Oh, I need to actually have a variable check in here. Yeah, there you go. Oh, and now I'm writing Java code instead of Python. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, the different languages differ based on their use of whitespace. Java is not a language where whitespace is important, but to Java, but it's so important to us as programmers. Again, like when we get to when we start writing slightly more complicated pieces of code, which we're already kind of doing, but next week, we're basically going to spend some time starting to implement some simple algorithms. The readability difference between what I had before and this starts to become super, super important, particularly when you have nested if statements. So let's say I had something like this, and now let's say I'm putting everything on the same line, right? This just becomes impossible to read, right? Because when I see this if statement that starts on line 3, I have no idea where it ends, right? Because now I see another one here and I see a close brace and I'm like, does the close brace match the if statement started on line 3 or does it match the if statement that started on line 4? And so when I start indenting these properly, now visually I can see really easily, right? And this should be here and this should be here and this should be here. Visually, I can identify the first branch of the if statement very easily because it's pushed over to the right? And so again, there's really two answers to this question. On some level, Java doesn't care about the white space in your code, but humans care a great deal. So going back to check style, let me just kind of again make another provide another explanation for why we use this. So when you guys go off and you work at a software development company someday or in industry, you're gonna when you want to make a change to a piece of code, there's an approval process, right? It's not like you can just go, you're working on a big project like, I don't know, Microsoft Office or Chrome or the Facebook website. You just don't like sit down one day and make a change and then suddenly it's on the website. There's a multiple step process for having those changes approved and tested and vetted and stuff like that. And one of the first steps in that is going to be that your code is properly formatted. If you try to check in code to any major code base at any company across the world, big ones, small ones, medium-sized ones, that doesn't follow their style conventions, they just won't take it, right? And someone's going to probably come yell at you because it's like, look, this is stupid, right? Just write your code so that everybody else can read it in the way that we've agreed on. It's nothing to fight about. It's just something that we all do to help each other out, right? Is to follow these guidelines. Every single company that writes code has these types of rules or comes to them. If you're in like a 2 or 3 person company, you might just agree on some informally that you're going to follow, but they're still there, right? This is a part of modern software development. Python, no semicolons, that's also true. There are some Java-like languages that are out there now that are starting to have what I would consider to be better syntax. So for example, Kotlin, which is a language that I'm really fond of, dispenses with semicolons. They're optional. You can use them if you can't get out of the habit of putting them at the end of statements, but you don't need them. All right, let's see here. See if I have any additional questions. Go check out the forum. Don't see anything. What do you guys want to talk about? Do you have any questions for me about today's lesson? There was a small bug on the homework that we fixed this morning, so I don't know if some of you did it already, but if you did it like before 10 a.m., you might want to go back and redo it. So if you when we have problems with our homework problems, as long as you get the homework problem correct once, you got it. You don't have to go back and fix it later if we decide to fix the way that the problems are tested. So some people this morning that got up earlier or on Eastern time zones had the good fortune of solving a slightly simpler version of today's homework problem due to a bug in how we grade it. But we fixed that bug, and so the rest of you get to enjoy the homework problem as is. One thing I want to just remind you of is that there are going to be homework posted for tomorrow and Sunday. So for the first couple weeks of the class, while we're helping get you guys up to speed and kind of get going, there won't be a lesson tomorrow, but there will be a homework problem, and then there'll be another homework problem on Sunday. And these are problems that you should be able to complete at this point. There's no new content being covered on these homework problems. They're really just homework problems that give you more practice with conditionals, but they are required, and they're going to be part of your grade. So make sure that you log on Saturday or Sunday and take care of those. Yeah, so how do you check if you completed the homework? So right now, if you go to the page and you've done the homework, there should be like a green check mark next to the homework problem that will tell you that. In a couple weeks, we'll have a grading page up on the website that'll allow you to check on this stuff. But for now, there should be that visual indicator. At some point, again, we're getting there. The website's new this semester, and so there's a couple of pieces that aren't quite ready to go yet. But I think at some point soon, we'll have a way for you to just kind of make sure that you've dusted off the homework, and maybe I'll try to work on that late next week so that it's ready to go for before kind of the first set of homework problems are due. But yeah, great question. That is something that's coming. Let's see. Good. There's a good question down there. Yeah. So can you speed up the walkthroughs? No, not yet. This is not the first time someone has asked about this, and I don't. It's not that it's not doable. It's just I don't know when we'll get to it. Those are using kind of our own sort of bespoke system for presenting them. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it's possible. I just don't know when we'll get to it, right? This might not be something that we get around to until next semester or later in this semester, but it's not the super high priority item right now. All right, so question about, yeah, so the question is like, why? So I don't know if there's a good answer for why. That's how if statements work, right? So the question is, why, once I enter one branch of the if statement, do I not test the other alternatives? You can think of it, well, actually, let's look at that here, okay? So if I run this code, what's gonna happen is that, so this is an if statement, and you'll see that it has an else branch. So the rule of thumb is that if an if statement has an else branch, then I know that one of the branches will be executed. One of these arms, sometimes we refer to them, of the if statement is going to be entered and executed. If I don't have an else statement, so no matter what value I put in for speed, if I'm going backwards, right? If I'm going really fast, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm always going to enter one of these, and the reason for that is because of this else statement. Now let's take off the else and see what happens. Okay, so now sometimes I'll enter one, but it's mad at me about, I need a semicolon. Yeah, there you go. But sometimes you'll see that there's no output produced by the program. And the reason is because when I don't have an else statement, then it's possible that none of the branches will be executed. So the rule of thumb is, if there's an else statement, then one of the branches will always be executed. Which one depends on the conditions that are being tested, but one will always be executed, because if I don't enter any of the ones at the top, I'll get to the else and I'll execute that branch. If there's no else statement, it's possible that 0 will be executed, but at most 1. So rule of thumb, when I have an else, always 1. If no else, sometimes 0, sometimes 1, depending on the conditions. So the question was, why in this case, so let's pick a value that might actually, well, these are kind of, actually, let's write this in a different way. So this will be kind of fun. So we're going to say if speed is greater than 85, because sometimes the way that you lay these out can actually make them a little bit simpler because of this top to bottom execution. So in this case, I'm going to reverse the order in which I test things. So the first thing I'm going to do is test to see if you're going really fast. Then I'm going to test to see, if you're going slightly less fast, but still fast enough to get a ticket. And then I'm going to test to see if you're going, okay, above the speed limit, but within a range that's okay. And then I'm going to leave this guy to the end. So what's interesting about this is that these two do the same thing, but you'll look and see that on some level, the conditions being tested here are simpler. So here I have, this one is just a single conditional expression, but this one is a compound conditional expression that has two parts. And then this is another compound conditional expression that has two parts. And so, and the reason for this is because of this top to bottom execution. So one way to think about it is, by the time I get to the branch that's on line 5, I've already discarded all the speeds that are above 85. And so if I enter this branch, I know that the speed is above 75, but it's not above 85, because if it was above 85, I would have entered the branch on line 4. And when I get down to the branch that starts on line 7, again, now at this point, I know that the speed can't be above 75, because if it was above 75, I would have entered this branch here or the branch up here. And so this is sort of like process of elimination, right? It's like I take all the speeds, and first I take care of all the ones that are above 85. And then I look at what I've got left. And then I take care of all the ones that are left that are above 75. And then I look at what I've got left. And then I take care of all the ones that are left that are above 65. And then I look at what I've got left, and I take care of anything that's left in the else statement. Okay? So, but again, the question was, why do I only enter 1? And so let me get rid of this. We'll just make sure that this is still working, and it is. And the reason for this is because if I want to enter more than one if statement, the right thing to do is just have 2 if statements. So here, now if I run this, right, you'll see that I'm only going to enter this one, right? But let's put something like 85 in here. And now you'll see that there's 2 print statements that are executed because I entered this branch. Sorry, not this one because it's not greater than 85. I entered the branch or the arm that starts on that consists of line 6, this block. And then I just kept going. So this if statement down here is now completely independent of the one above, in the sense that it's not linked to it, right? And so this if statement is just it's completely independent. And so you can really think of these as totally separate from each other, right? I could comment this one out, and the one at the bottom still works fine, right? They're not connected to each other in any way. And so if I need a case where I actually need to do 2 things, the correct thing to do is to set up 2 different if statements, right? One if statement that decides whether or not I want to do the first thing, and the second if statement that decides whether or not I want to do the second thing. And then, either one of them can work, and sometimes I can see both. So let's actually make this a little bit, let's use a different example. So in Java, I can tell if a number is divisible by another number by checking the remainder. And this is something that we'll see in the future when we work with arrays. But for now, I'm just going to use it with numbers. So let me show you how that works. So for example, if I use the remainder operator here, what I'm going to see is 0, because the remainder when I divide 8 by 2 is 0. If I use 3, you'll see that the remainder is 2, because I get 1, 3, 2, 3, I'm up to 6, and now I've got 2 left over, right? So let's use 2 if statements to see if a number is divisible by both 2 and by 3. Okay, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to say if number divided by 2 is 0. So if the remainder, sorry, not divided by, if the remainder when I divide whatever the value of number is by 2 is 0, it means that number is divisible by 2. It's an even multiple of 2. And so we'll print number, and actually I'll just print divisible by 2. Okay. But a number can also be divisible by 3. And so I'm going to have a separate if statement down here. We'll say divisible by 3. Okay, so, and I'm missing semicolons. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so in this case, number is only divisible by 2. Now let's use something like this. 9 is only divisible by 3. Now let's use a number that's divisible by both. So 12 is 6 times 2, 4 times 3. I mean, when I said I was bad at math, I didn't mean I was that bad. But so this number is actually divisible by both, and you'll see that these are independent from each other. Now, if I did this, you'll see that, so now we're looking at the difference between 2 separate if statements, both of which can be executed, versus linking them together through an else, in which case only one can be executed. And so here, I can handle numbers that are only divisible by 3 or only divisible by 2, but I don't properly handle numbers that are divisible by both 3 and by 2. And so how you set up your if statements really depends on the data that you're working with or what you're trying to accomplish. In this case, the fact that a number is divisible by 2 does not mean that it's not divisible by 3, right? So I really want these to be independent from each other. I don't want them to be linked together. In other cases, like if I go back and let me see if I can pull this apart, right? I go back and look at the speed example that I used to start this. Yeah, so if I look at these speed examples, right, what I'm really trying to do is make one decision. So again, you can imagine a cop sitting there, and I've always wondered, you guys may wonder this as well when you're driving around in the highway, what is the actual speed at which I need to go in order to get pulled over or get a ticket, Because I've been pulled over for going 75 in a 70 zone, seems kind of okay, most of the time. And then I see people going by me on the highway that are going 110. So I just don't know. And I'm assuming that, when a police officer is sitting there in their car with the little radar gun out and they see the number come up, they must have some threshold in their mind where it's okay, yeah, you're all right. You're, whatever. I mean, you're only going a few over and I'm in the middle of a good part of this article or there's a baseball game on or something. I don't know how they make the decision, but at some point in this example, I only want to print one thing, right? I want to make a choice out of one of these 4 alternatives, right? To sort of classify this person based on their speed. And so in that case, linking things together using an else if is more appropriate. So hopefully that helps, right? Let me know if you have more questions. I mean, this is, again, this is something that I think I'll probably throw into Monday's lesson as well, because I don't think I really nailed it in today's lesson on compound conditionals, is the difference between these 2 separate independent if statements and them linked together through an else if. So once I link them together through an else if, Java is only going to pick one of the 2. If I establish them as separate if statements and don't link them with an else, then Java can pick from either group. So it can pick 1 from the first group, 0 or 1 from the first if statement, and 0 or 1 from the second if statement, and those 2 choices are independent. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit. So next week, one of the things that's happening right now, is that it's sort of a lot of this is super abstract because we actually haven't talked about any interesting problems yet. We're trying to come up with kind of semi-interesting things for you to do on the homework, but when you're just getting started and we're just sort of coming up with the building blocks, we can't really, build anything super cool yet. But next week, so on Monday, we're going to talk about how you repeat a part of code more than once. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to actually get to the point where we're going to start to talk about problem solving with code. So we're going to start to talk about algorithms and how you use algorithms to solve problems. And then things start to get cooler, right? Because we're actually, we're going to take our variables and variable operations, and we're going to take our conditional statements, and we're going to take our loops that we'll talk about on Monday. And now we have enough tools in our bag to actually start to be able to do some cool things. And so we'll start to work through some algorithms for solving certain problems, doing certain things with code. And that gets that's where things start to get really cool, right? Where you start to really kind of realize wow, this is, I can actually do this. Now it's frustrating and hard, right? Because, one of the things that people always say about this class, particularly, is that it's it's like they know what they want the computer to do, but it's very hard to tell it how to do that, right? And that's something that, we all struggle with. I mean, as I'm thinking about things I want to do with the website, I feel the same way. It's like I know how I want it to work. I can kind of see what I want to happen. But it's the process of actually telling the computer how to do that's where all your time and energy goes into, right? Now, at the end of the day, you get the satisfaction when you're done, hopefully, of seeing your ideas come to life, which is incredibly exciting. But baby steps. So next week we'll start to take these tools, the simple tools that we have, and start to learn how we can compose them and actually be able to solve some problems, or at least build up some slightly larger programs that might be able to do some slightly interesting things. And again, as you learn computer science, right? As you learn how to program, you learn about this field, what you can do, the kind of things you can build, and the different ways that you have at your disposal to change the world and build cool things, just like grow almost exponentially, right? So when you're getting started, it's kind of slow and but you get to a certain point where you start to learn a few more things. And, I think by the end of this class, we sort of have you at this point in the curve where you can start to feel it getting steep. And that's a super exciting place to be, because you can start to realize, like, hey, I really can understand this stuff and I can work with it. And the power, right? Just the raw capability that this unlocks for you in terms of your ability to build things and to change the world is astounding, right? And that's the number one reason to stick with this, even on days when it's tough. So question, was I at Harvard when Mark Zuckerberg was there? I was a teaching assistant for they call them teaching fellows at Harvard. I was a teaching fellow for the last computer science class that Mark Zuckerberg took at Harvard. I knew Mark a little bit. Anyway, I'll try to summarize this briefly. If you come back at 4:00 for the social hour that I'm hosting today, I'll be happy to tell this story. So I knew him a little bit. I was offered a job at Facebook like pretty early on, maybe when they had about 20 engineers or so. So had I taken that job, I don't know what I would be doing now. I mean, I'm not sure I would have stayed at Facebook for what would that have been, about 10, 12, 15 years. Well, actually, no, it'd be longer than that. I mean, almost like 20 years now, right? That was about circa 2004. I do know Mark. I've run into him a few times. I visited Facebook a couple times to see friends and ran into him when I was there. I'll save my personal thoughts about Facebook and about what's going on there for the social hour. But I mean, from a technical perspective, obviously Facebook is one of those things that has just completely transformed the world around us. The question is whether or not that's been primarily a good thing or not, right? And I think that's still, we're still that's still something that's happening, right? I think Facebook's a great example of the fact that technology is not inherently good or bad, but definitely not inherently good. Building something that connects people online is not necessarily going to make the world a better place. It can, but it has to be used the right way, and you have to sort of guide it and build it and manage it properly. But again, if you want more details on that, come back at 4:00. So let me go through, as I always do, today's calendar, because we have a lot of cool stuff happening in CS 125, a lot of great programming today. So starting up right after this on Zoom, Shruti and Isaiah are going to go through, review some concepts with you. We have the second presentation of the daily lesson, which is at 1 p.m. with Sarad and Shilpasri. And then today is the last day, and I'll probably post on the forum about this because I forgot in my earlier announcement. It's the last day of our first week new student onboarding program. So, there were some questions about how to set up the forum. Come back at 2:00, ask those questions there. You can also ask those questions on the forum because, people will be happy to kind of walk you through, or maybe Daniel will post a little screencast or something about how to do things. So we have those, the 2:00 session on new student onboarding, the 3:00 session on Ask Us Anything with Blair, And then me and Nathaniel will be running a social hour at 4 o'clock. So again, feel free to sign up for that. I'm excited about that. It's always fun to talk to students and kind of the end of our first week together. So that's something to celebrate. And then we have 2 homework sessions tonight, 5 p.m. with David and Zufan, and then 8 p.m. with Rohan and Isaiah. And so that's it. That's CS 125. That's the daily. Our daily program schedule. I hope you guys will join us for some of those, or none, depending on what you want out of this class and what else you have going on today. But do feel encouraged and free to come by the social hour today, because that's that if you want to hear me tell stories, that's the best place to come and do that. So, all right, I'm gonna go back, check the. Okay, so I don't see any additional questions on the forum or in the chat. So thanks everybody for showing up. I'll post a poll over the weekend to see if people would like this move to Zoom. The only complication with that is that in Zoom, if you participate, you're going to end up on the video. I do want to keep posting these on YouTube. And so we'll just have to come to an agreement that if you're not comfortable with being on the stream, then there's a way to change your identity, I think, so that your name doesn't show up, or you can always ask questions in the chat. Right. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed your first week of college. For many of you, that's super exciting. Welcome to college. Welcome to Illinois. I hope things are going well. I'm looking forward to some cooler weather. It's there's a couple of beautiful months coming up here once we get into fall where it cools off and you can open the windows again, and the days start to get a little shorter, and it's beautifully quiet and dim at dusk, and it's just a nice place to be kind of out here on the prairie in fall. So I'm looking forward to that, and I will look forward to seeing you guys all back here.